maybe the sixth session by now. And today I thought we've given texts and texts and texts, although we've kind of drawn a picture for you with text, a story, and narrative. Today I thought we'd do more of a picture journal, okay? But we'll start with a few texts. So let's get to the slides, okay? So we talked about this, Adam and Eve being tempted, and we talked about how Satan works from the very start. Satan is telling lies in God's name. And that's an important thing to know. He is saying what he's saying is true. All right. He said that to Adam and Eve because in Genesis, I think it was 3:5, he said, "Oh, you can eat, you won't die." And he used the words, "For God does know." In other words, what he's implying to Eve is that what he's saying to Eve, God knows to be true. So he's making lies, telling lies in God's name. In other words, he's saying that whatever he's dishing out is righteous, it's true, it's not false, and this is what is to be accepted. And this is from the very start, okay? Now, we talked about this too, that the spiritual warfare we are in is that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God, to the pulling down of strongholds of lies as truth, as God's truth. And 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God. So there is the knowledge of God, which is in the Bible. But there are many things, imaginations and high things that exalted itself against the knowledge of God. And that we must bring everything into captivity, every thought to the obedience of Christ. And that's our main effort through God as a Christian. Okay, so some recap of what we've done, okay? We talked about twin prophecies because they have one start date. There are two genealogies, the Israel and the Gentiles. And both, because of these twin prophecies, have one destiny. And the 2300 leads us to that destiny. So the 490 was for Israel, okay? And the 2300 is for both Gentile and Messianic Jews. Right? So much as it is emphasized in the Bible narrative that God created humanity and he will bring humanity together again, right? The ones that believe, obviously. So the 490 was about Jesus' first advent, and the 2300 is about Jesus' second advent. The 490 was really completely known in Daniel. The 2300 was also known in Daniel, but closed, sealed, until it was opened in Revelation, particularly in Revelation chapter 10. I'm just recapping, and I'm hoping that you will get this picture in your head as we go forward, right? And then we saw in Daniel and Revelation the growth of four kingdoms. From Rome, a little horn. And then the little horn developed into competing nations, kings of the north, kings of the south, and we see a sea beast in Revelation rising up of the sea and making an alliance with the land beast. Now, if we count from Rome till now, it's 2,500 plus years of continuous dominance from Rome, since Rome, of the little horn, and growing all the way till now and into the future. Now, this is a long time, and it is really quite shocking, I think we should say, that we are now studying and wondering who this land beast is. who this sea beast is, who this land beast is. After 2,500 years, we should know it for sure, right? So this beast is amazing. It has been there, and we think he's not here, and he's been in plain sight, and we don't know.
He must be camouflaged.
Yeah, it's camouflage of some form of camouflage, not invisible, but visible, yet not recognized. Okay, so Daniel 12 was sealed, and Revelations 10 opened it. Now, we have been talking very generally, giving you a big picture. All right? At the end of today, what I'm going to suggest is that we need to dig in. All right, so and why we need to dig in. So in Revelations 10, the instruction given to the people who understood the prophecy was to prophesy again. And so that's what we're doing. We're studying prophecy again, right? And of course, the end point is God will regain his dominion of sea and land, because that glorious angel in Revelations 10 stood with 1 foot on the sea and 1 foot on the land. And that's dominion, regaining dominion. Okay, next slide. All right, now all that fall, the fall that happened in Eden, that was not where the controversy, where the war began. It began in heaven. And Revelations 12 tells you that it was a war not of weapons, but of words, of lies as truth. And Satan, or Lucifer, convinced 1/3 of the angels that he was right.
Mm-hmm.
And that controversy, that war of words and lies and ideology was so bad that 1/3 of the angels left and was cast out of heaven. That's why when Eden was created, Lucifer said, I want to be represented. I have convinced 1/3 of the angels to come with me. I will also convince Adam and Eve that they should come with me. So I want a tree, just one tree in the whole of Eden. And he got his tree. That's where it started. For us on earth. So what we're going to do is look at the trajectory of Lucifer from the Bible. And we've been looking at that for a bit. To form the one world order, to give a mark of the one world order, 666 on earth. Now, here's a question for you young ladies. When can we afford to be naked and unashamed, right?
Not young, but I think when we feel loved and secure.
Okay. Now, that being loved and being secure is like in Eden before the fall. They were with God. Mm-hmm. They were in a very secure place. And they were in paradise. There was no danger, no fear, no reason to weep, to be stressed. And so, in the presence of God, they were naked. In each other's presence and in the presence of God, they were naked and ashamed. So it's the environment, right? Where we are, how we feel, that we can feel secure. All right. Now, God created the world in 6 days. And on the 7th day in Eden, the Bible says he rested. That was the first Sabbath. All right, Genesis 2:3 says this.
And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his works, which God created and made.
Now, obviously, God just spoke and it happened. It wasn't a rest of being tired, because there was no physical labor. And when God created these things for us to be secure and safe, he kept saying, every time he created, it was good, it was good, it was very good. And the 7th day was when he had communion. He spent that day with Adam and Eve in a secure place. And Adam and Eve in that few days, in that day, in those hours of the day, was in close communion, bask in the love of God, being closely observing him, gaining knowledge of his design, the wondrous design of Eden. Okay, so this was Sabbath. This was about knowing God in a growing way, to admire him, to be in awe of him. That was the first Sabbath in Eden. So Sabbath with God, as we know it now, right, is still spiritually oneness with God, immersed in his perfection and sanctity, experiencing fellowship and knowledge of the character of God. So as with each day, as we, on a Sabbath, we study the book of the Bible, and to reflect on it and to meditate on it and to fellowship with each other, we see the goodness, the value, the perfection of creation. Even in our fallen world, we see remnants. We know trees grow, right, perfectly green in Eden with no brown leaves. Here we see trees with brown leaves and with perhaps dead branches, but yet the beauty is still there. Right? So as we look upon the design of God, we understand who God is. Not that God is in the flowers and trees, but his signature, his creation, right? His design is what we see. So on Sabbath, we experience the blessings of God's design, creation, and love. And on Sabbath, spiritually speaking, we can be safe and naked with God. Now, in Deuteronomy 4:24, for the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. So God is hot in his love for us. He is jealous in his love for us. And so when Adam and Eve fell, right, but was tempted and succumbed by the serpent, God immediately in Eden made a prophetic statement to the serpent in the hearing of Adam and Eve. In Genesis 3:15, he said, And I
will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel.
So what God meant was that from the genealogy of Adam and Eve will come a seed. Right? This was Christ, Jesus. And Jesus will bruise Satan's head. But Satan will hurt only his heel. Okay, now hang on. And in Eden, right in Eden, where everything was perfect, God slew an animal, a lamb, and gave the skins to dress, right, to dress Adam and Eve, to cover Adam and Eve. And with the promise that this seed, this lamb, Jesus will come. And that was the 490 prophecy in Daniel, right? So God is a jealous God, a consuming fire of love. And he wanted us for himself. And therefore he put enmity between us and Satan, satanic lies. That's what happened. So the lamb, Jesus was a lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And then the slaying of the lamb and the institutionalizing of the sanctuary on earth by Moses was only a shadow, was an outcome of God's plan. But it was also a shadow. That sanctuary was a shadow of a heavenly sanctuary above. Now, we mustn't imagine and think about architecture and buildings, okay? Its functionality. What was the ministry? Right? What was the ministry of the sanctuary in heaven that was occurring on earth in copy, so that for people to understand? Well, one of the main ministry on the earth was the slaying of the lambs. It was a blood covenant and pointing to the coming of Jesus. And when Jesus came and was slain, that was the end of that slaying, the outer court slaying of the lamb. But the point is, the function of the sanctuary had many compartments. There were two more compartments to look at, and we'll get into that. Okay, so there was, apart from the outer court, which is way back out left here on the screen, there was a holy place, all right, where there were sandal candlesticks and bread and an altar of incense. And then behind a curtain, there was the Ark of the Covenant, where the Shekinah glory of God rested. So there were two more compartments have to be considered. to understand what to expect. Now, the first thing to expect was Jesus ascended. After his resurrection, he ascended and he went and ministered to us as our high priest in heaven, in the real sanctuary. Now, please do not think of the architecture, right? But think of the function, right? The ministry. So, and in Revelations 1:13, in vision, John saw. And let's read this.
And in the midst of the heaven, as the seven candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle.
So John saw in vision the Son of Man, Christ, standing amongst the seven candlesticks. So Christ stood there in that holy place. Not in the most holy place where the Shekinah glory is, but he stood here in the holy place. All right, so he saw, and Christ was dressed in a garment down to the foot with a golden girdle. All right, and this is the garb of a high priest. Let's take a look at the next slide. Now, the garb of a high priest is elaborate. Right? Again, I don't think, well, I personally don't picture Christ in this garb, but the meaning of this garment is important. Now, on the right, you will see this, that golden girdle, all right, here, yeah, the golden girdle is to atone for our sinful heart. So the purpose and function and ministry of Christ, of the high priest, is to atone for our sinful heart. Okay, and if you go to the white at the bottom of that frock or dress, fine linen tuning to atone for our killing. Okay, if you go to the apron, right there, it's to atone for idolatry. Okay, and if you didn't get the headgear, if you went to the headgear and read it, it is to atone for our pride. So the ministry of Christ is in what he is dressed in. I mean, if you saw a soldier, that's a soldier because of what that garment represents. So when they saw and they understood this ministry is to atone for our sins. All right. Now, I put up a picture of a spaceman in a spacesuit. Why do you think a spaceman needs a spacesuit? Because space is a dangerous place. It's an alien place. In space, there's no air. In space, there's radiation that's dangerous. So the spacesuit maintains a secure and safe place in an alien part of the world, space, so that this man in there or woman can safely return home. So the ministry of Christ as a high priest is to minister to us now in the fallen world, after the fall in Eden, in an alien world, where if we did not have that ministry, that purpose as shown in the garment, the values of the world, the toxic values of the world would just sink into us and we will absorb it and it will destroy us. That's why we need that garment. That's why this man needs a spacesuit, so that he can come home safely. Home, back where he should be. And the home for us is heaven. So, what are these things that are surrounding us in this fallen world? Oh, covetousness, materialism, sensuality, lusts, pride. These things will sink into us without the ministry of Christ. So that is the purpose of Christ's ministry and the sanctuary for the Jews and for us. Now Christ reigns, not as king yet, but as priest, our high priest in the sanctuary above. So this Sabbath, the first Sabbath that they spent, was in the security and the love of God. Exodus 31:13 and Ezekiel talks more about the Sabbath.
Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you. Ezekiel 20:12. Moreover also I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they may know that I am the Lord that sanctify them.
Okay, to be sanctified is to be set aside by God for his purpose. So God set aside things like the Sabbath day for us. Right? So sanctification is to set aside for his purpose. And of course, his purpose is holy, just, and good. So the Sabbath was made for us that we may experience that security, that rest, that we are not striving against things that are bad for us, but that we can rest in trust that God will make it right for us. Okay? Now, our high priest, the functionality is to take us home to heaven, back to Eden. All right? And Mark 2:28 says, Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. Jesus is Lord, or the one with whom we are in fellowship on the Sabbath in a spiritual way. Now, the most important actually is Hebrews 2:11. Now, Hebrews 2:11 talks about oneness. This spiritual oneness is described here as, let's read it first, okay? For both, he, Jesus Christ, that sanctifieth, and they who are sanctified are all of one, for which cause Christ is not ashamed to call them brethren. Now, we all want oneness. Now, if there were 30 of us listening to this talk, we all want to be one with Christ. We want to be spiritually one with Christ. And the only way to do that is expressed in Hebrews 2:11. For both, all right, both Christ and they who are sanctified, the 30 of us, let's say, are all now 31 of us, 30 of us and one of Christ, are all of one, united. How? Because we are sanctified by him. And for which cause he's not ashamed to call us brethren. He'll call us brother or sister. Now, for which cause means what? That is why he came. That is the purpose of his ministry even now. Okay? So, oneness, both become one. And that's the reason he came. And that is sanctification. So, sanctification is oneness with God. So, keep that in mind. Right? Now, here's a very interesting point to be made here. In Revelation 16:16, actually, the chapter Revelation 16 is all about the plagues, the 7 plagues falling. And then 16:16 describes Christ coming with a sword in his mouth. Right? And that is described as Armageddon. So Armageddon is not a war in Palestine with weaponry and so forth, but Christ coming with a sword in his mouth. Now, what kind of a war is that with Christ coming with a sword in his mouth, right? Now, what's the sword? The sword is the word of God, penetrating, cutting into the very marrows of our heart and soul, right? Now, the way to win in Armageddon for us, the Bible says this, and this was in red. You check it out, Revelation 16:15. 16:15 are Christ's own words, right? And it says this.
Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he fall, and they see his shame.
Okay, how do we triumph in this Armageddon? If we watch. So now we are studying this prophecies. We are watchful. We're watchful of the events, right? And on top, and being watchful, because we are studying, we will keep our garments, What is this garment that if you had that garment, you would triumph in Armageddon? Armageddon itself. If not, you'll be naked. And the shame is seen, right? So this garment is like that spacesuit. It is, that garment is similar to the one that the high priest wore. It is the garment that where we are sanctified, because it atones for our sin, our pride, our killing, our evil talks, what else is it? Idolatry and so forth, right? So it atones for it. In other words, it sanctifies us. And the sanctification in 2 Peter 1, it says this: by divine power, we partake of divine nature. Right? By taking on divine nature, we are dressed in that garment, that spacesuit. We are being sanctified by the ministry of Christ. And because we then have that robe of righteousness, we are covered and our shame is not seen. That is the way to win Armageddon. So that's why we're studying. That's why we are looking at what sanctification is, what the Sabbath is, and what role it plays in this entire story. Okay, now we're going to go into more pictures, I think. Okay, now as we talked over the last sessions, we talked about how the pagan nations were trampling upon Israel, okay, and trampling upon the sanctuary, the work of God. In past history and currently, we will see pictures, and we will take you through this picture journal. Now, one of the first tramplings was by a man, a Greek king called Antiochus. He sacrificed a pig, an unclean animal, on the altar of God. Okay? Now, a lot of scholars now say, oh, Antiochus is the little horn that came out of Rome. Now, we know, we studied this, the little horn came out of Rome. But Antiochus was a Greek king. And Greece was the third kingdom. It was Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. So Antiochus came out of the third kingdom, not Rome. The little horn we studied, came out of the fourth, Rome. So Antiochus is not the little horn, but Antiochus did trample upon the sanctuary of God. Okay? Next picture. Now I'm fast forwarding, okay, pictures to tell a story. And there was a Roman emperor called King Constantine. In about 300 or 80, he changed the Sabbath to Sunday. Now what happened was that at that time, as a Roman king and an emperor, he saw there was a lot of pagan people, right, worshipping the sun on a Sunday. So he said, he saw in a vision, the cross in the sky, as the sun as a cross in the sky. So he instituted Sunday worship and got within his kingdom a lot of pagan worshippers. And then what happened was this: during that time, early Christians were keeping the Sabbath. And they were persecuted because there was the persecution, and they were keeping Sabbath, and they were distinct, apart, separate from the sun worshippers keeping the Sabbath. And so they were persecuted. And then King Constantine said, why don't you join us? Keep the Sunday as a day of worship, and there will be no persecution. And these Christians went for it. So from being persecuted to no persecution, thousands just came in. And that was the institutionalization of Sunday worship, King Constantine. And then later, there was the changing of the 10 Commandments. And here is a graphic version of it. You will see that on the left, the biblical 10 Commandments, you shall not make for yourself any idol, right? You shall not commit idolatry. That was canceled because in the pagan church of that time, as it grew, there were a lot of idols. So they deleted that, the second commandment, and blanked it out, right? But to keep the 10, what happened was this. At the bottom, you'll see the 10 commandments. You shall not covet
Your neighbor's
your
house.
neighbor's house. And they split it so that it says you shall not covet your neighbor's wife and you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. So they split one and make two so that on the right, it was still 10, right? And the fourth commandment, which says, remember the Sabbath day, they reduced that, reduced it, simplified it. I mean, if you look at Exodus, and we'll read it later, it's a very long commandment. They really simplified it and said, remember to keep holy the Lord's day, right? So they changed the words. So there was manipulation of God's 10 commandments. And then there was, moving fast forward, there was in 1517, and earlier, even the 1400s, they started the Protestant Reformation. But the key man in this whole thing is Martin Luther. 1517, he nailed 95 Theses on the doors of the church, Wittenberg. And the persecution ignited from that event was huge, was horrific. Many were burned at the stake, many were killed, millions, and to the point that by the hundreds of thousands, people migrated to the US of A to seek safety. And as the states grew to give safety to these people, the first president, George Washington, was installed in 1789. All right, so USA became the land of the free with a constitution, a wall of separation between church and state. Because in Europe, in Martin Luther's time, where the church had domination, there was persecution. So the US did not want this, and that was why there's a separation between church and state. Now, the Bible in Daniel 7:25 says this.
And think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time.
Okay, the beast power wanted not only to change laws like the 10 commandments, but he wanted to change times. Now, during the Protestant Reformation, the reformers, many of the reformers, including a scientist like Isaac Newton, they began to say the Pope is the Antichrist, is the beast. Okay? So, what happened to counter the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, to counter it, they came up, two Jesuits came up with changing times, all right? To change a time is to say, oh, this prophecy, this time prophecy is not relevant. Okay, for example, this thing called preterism by a Jesuit called Alcazar, and he lived 1554 to 1613. That was, 1517, remember, was when Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses. So this heated up. The Protestant Reformation heated up. So to counter the Reformation, preterism invented by Alcazar said, no. The beast is not the current Pope. The beast is way back. Happened. The beast, in fact, happened a long time ago. It's probably Antiochus. Okay? And so by doing that, they distracted the people from the current name calling of the reformers that the beast is the Pope. And then futurism by Francisco Ribera. He was projecting the beast, not during our time, not in the past, but far into the future, saying that this beast will come immediately prior to the second coming of Christ, way into the future. Again, distracting us from seeing, from the reformers from seeing who the beast truly is, and from the people to see who the beast truly is. Now, let's just read Daniel 7, 21 and 22.
I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom.
Okay, so how long did this little horn, Rome, little horn, king of the north, the sea beast, the land beast, how long did they rule? Right, Daniel 7:21-22 says this: until the Ancient of Days, until judgment came, and until the saints, we people, the people of God, the faithful, possess the kingdom. Now, we've been through this before. We have not possessed the kingdom. So, the beast power ruled for a long time. And it will rule, it's ruling now. That's the scary part. It's ruling now. It's in our plain sight. It will rule till now. It has been 2,500 years plus. And we say we do not recognize who it is. That's why we're studying this. Why we're looking at a photo journal right now. Okay. Go back to that slide again. Okay, if we are studying in detail and we saw that word until, that word tells us this beast power, this evil power has reigned continuously. That word until. But if we don't study the Bible and do not know of that word, and then when preterism or futurism came to us, we would fall for it. So the purpose of studying the Bible is to know the intricacy, the every word, the intensity, the intricacy, the precision of the words. So that's important. That's where we're going. I hope you'll follow me. Okay, here's a piece of history. In 1798, upon the Pope Pius's refusal to renounce his temporal power, Pope Pius was taken prisoner and transported to France. He died 1 year later in Valence. Now, this picture is General Berthier on the left, Napoleon's general, taking Pope Pius captive. All right? And Pope Pius then died a year later in prison in Valence. Now, this is part of the French Revolution. They did not like, and we showed this in the previous talk, the French Revolution was caused by the nobility, the kings and the queens, and the unity they had with the papacy. And they controlled the whole population, they taxed the whole population, and the population revolted. They burned Bibles, they instituted a lady, a dancing girl, and called her the goddess of reason. And so a new enlightenment, all right, they call it the Enlightenment, emerged from France. And so this is potentially, and what the deadly wound is. The deadly wound, if you recall, was referred to in Revelations 13, 3, and 12. In other words, the Revelation 13 says, the sea beast received a deadly wound. And it goes further to say, and the deadly wound was subsequently healed. And when the deadly wound was subsequently healed, and as the healing took place, the sea beast got more and more power and then formed an alliance with the land beast and then dominated the earth. All right, so first it is a deadly wound, then the sea beast rises in power from the healing of the deadly wound, and then forms an alliance with the land beast. Okay, this is the sequence. All right, let's go with more pictures. So let's read. All right, about the alliance, which can only happen after the deadly wound was healed.
And I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads.
Okay, so for the first time after the deadly wound in Revelation 13, a land beast is introduced. And this land beast is introduced as the enforcer. It spoke as a lamb, like a gentle lamb, but later it spake as a dragon. Okay, and it had the power to force small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive the 666, which is a spiritual mark. So an enforcer, a military power, perhaps an economic power, rose and formed an alliance with the sea beast and enforced the religious dictates of the sea beast. Okay. And more on the beasts.
And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed.
Now, the first beast referred to is the sea beast, and he exercised all the power. The land beast exercises all the power of the sea beast. They are in alliance, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. The first beast, remember, the sea beast is a religious power. It desired worship. So the enforcer forces everyone on earth, hopefully not everyone, now that we know, right? It enforces the mark, wanting to enforce it, hopefully, they hope, on everyone on earth, that they may worship the sea beast and force to worship. That's where religious freedom ends. Now, I want to talk about Babylon here, all right? But take note that Babylon is a city, and a city means a system of beliefs, values, and governance, like Singapore is a city. Now, when we talk about Babylon, we are not talking about the people who live in it. All right? So as we talk about the papacy, as we allude to the Roman Catholic Church, we are talking about the system of belief, the system of governance. We are not critical of its members. All right? So here it's very important to know that we don't bear any animosity to Roman Catholic people. In fact, the Bible, as you read these two verses, you will know that God is telling in the prophetic message to call people out of Babylon, the city. He calls the people in that city my people. That's very important. God calls people my people in Babylon. Okay, let's read.
Revelations 14:8. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Revelation 18:4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not her plagues.
Okay, so when we talk about Babylon or a church system, we're talking about the system and its governance. We're not criticizing its people. All right, so that's very important to take in before we move forward. So the Holy Alliance, the first major alliance after 1798, was highlighted by Time magazine. It was called the Holy Alliance. It's between Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, and Pope John Paul II. Okay, what did they do to deserve such prominence, such mention? And there was a movie made, John Paul II, and the fall of communism. Now, this is a very important thing to know. The US has been fighting communism but failed. Right? They fought it in Korea and failed. North Korea. They fought it in Vietnam and failed. They tried to fight it in Cuba and failed. But when they formed an alliance with John Paul II and fought it in Europe, it succeeded. And so the US, for the first time, found an ally that was stronger than military. An ally that was church, that had religious beliefs and governance, and that gave power to the US as well. So there's the picture of John Paul II. He was a Polish pope, all right? And there was Reagan, and Time magazine called it the Holy Alliance. Now in 1981, John Paul met Lech Walesa. Lech Walesa in Poland, they were trying to go democratic. They were trying to shake away the imposition, the rule or the power of Russia over them. So Pope met Walesa and encouraged him to go democratic, to go strongly democratic. Okay? In 1981, the Congress in Poland elected Lech Walesa as its president and adopted a program calling for an active solidarity. That's their power, that's their party, to reform Poland's political and economic system. And this was the call in 1981 for Solidarity and Lech Walesa to go democratic and to shake off communism. Okay. In 1987, because of what they did, Poland became almost, the motions were set. And in 1987, Reagan called on Gorbachev, the USSR, to take down the Berlin Wall. Okay, so communism began to fall. And then in 1989, the Berlin Wall came down. Right? And communism began to crumble. And in 1989, Poland holds national elections. Solidarity candidates win all but one of the Senate seats. And so Poland became a democracy. And the clause of communism was cast aside. And USSR in 1981, Mikhail Gorbachev, 1989, sorry, declares that the USSR will no longer interfere in the internal affairs of Eastern Europe. So the union of Russia was broken and Russia became just Russia. And then following all that, in 1990, Bulgaria became free. Free elections, democracy for Bulgaria. In 1990, Latvia had independence. In 1991, Ukraine had independence. So communism just crumbled from that Holy Alliance. Oh, here's a picture of us. We happened to be in Berlin in 9th November 2019. That was the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So we took a picture. And we're not smiling because we want to be serious. This is a serious moment, okay? And to celebrate the 30th anniversary, they had a parade of musicians and priests. Now, why priests? Because the church had a main role in the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of communism in Europe. That's why the priests are there. And then in 1965, John Paul started this thing called Vatican II. That's about 55 years ago. Now, Vatican II embraced other religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, right? Many other religions, even toyed around with Red Indians and so forth. And here is a document, an extract of Vatican II, a declaration on the relation of the church to non-Christian religions by His Holiness Pope Paul. The Catholic Church rejects nothing that is true and holy in these religions. In Hinduism, men contemplate the divine mystery in profound meditation or a flight to God with love and trust. So they accepted that Hinduism was a valid flight to God, right? In contemplation, in meditation, as in yoga, for example. And then in Buddhism, in relation to Buddhism, Vatican II said, they attain liberation by their own efforts or through higher help, supreme illumination, a realization in meditation. And so because of Vatican II, they had mass involving Hindu dances. And the Pope visited the head person in I think it was Thailand, to cement the relationships. And then Pope John Paul died. Right? Now in the picture, in the funeral, How many US presidents do you see attend this funeral?
1, Clinton, 2, George Bush, and 3, George Bush Jr.
Why were there so many generations of US presidents? Because they had an alliance, because they realized the power of the papacy. That's why they were there. And then in 2014, the evangelicals in the US called for unity with the papacy. And some of these big names, you know, they are mainly influential people on TV. Yeah. And so that's 2014. Evangelicals, Protestants who protested, right? Who should be protesting, calling for unity. And this unity dialogue between the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church had started a long time ago. And finally, in 2017, they united. And they chose the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. Now, you remember, Luther nailed the 95 Theses on Wittenberg, in Wittenberg on 31st October 1517. So 500 years later, in 2017, 31st October, is the 500th anniversary. And they chose that date to announce the unity. Okay, so Lutherans don't protest anymore. There is unity. And here's a picture of the hug, the unity between the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church, 31st October. Now, obviously, the man with the back to us is Pope Francis. But what is the name of the man who heads Lutheran World Federation? Does anybody know? Now, I've been researching this. I've never bothered to find out, because everybody knows Pope Francis is the main player in this unity. All right? We know who he is because he's in the news all the time. But Lutheran World Federation, that man, I have no clue. I don't think you do either. The point is, who's the main player? And then Catholic and Anglicans are signing joint declarations of unity. All right? And Catholic and Methodists are also signing joint declarations. Now, these joint declarations are not total unity. You've got to realize that. Joint declarations work this way. All right, if I agree with you on 10 points, we sign a joint declaration on the 10 points. But you may have 3 points that are way off, and I may have 2 points that are way off that we don't agree. We ignore those things. Now, Protestants have got big problems with indulgences where the Catholic Church practices right up till now, where you can actually pay money to solve your sins problem, to get from purgatory to heaven. So that's indulgence. Oh, so we don't talk about indulgence in the joint declaration. In addition to Christ, the Catholic Church has Mary, for example. So we don't talk about Mary. So the joint declaration is artificial because it ignores the differences. Okay? So it is not complete agreement. It is just a joint declaration. Now, they've criticized Pope Francis. They've said, oh, he must stop tinkering with the Catholic faith, the faith of ages, the Catholic Church, long-standing teaching on the need to convert rather than to fraternize with unbelievers or to just make friends with them. So the Pope is making friends with everybody. And that's his mode of operation, and that's what he does, right? And lately, this is going back only 2 months, there was an Amazon meaning South America, Sinai, right? They are reaching and embracing the Amazon people. And they brought in this wooden statue, I suppose, of a woman, pregnant, and into the the Catholic Church, and the Pope was there, and they had prayers and so forth. And this statue was so offensive to some Catholics that a young man swiped it, stole it, and then threw it into the Tiber in Italy. And he was hailed as a hero, okay? So, and they began then to accuse their own church, the Catholics, began to accuse the Pope of pantheism. Now, what is pantheism, right? Okay, hang on, before we go to what is pantheism. So, in section 74 of Pope Francis' Amazon Synod, right? He states this, Pope Francis states this: He, which is God, is present in a glorious and mysterious way in the river, the trees, the fish, and the wind. As the Lord who reigns in creation without ever losing his transfigured wounds, while in the Eucharist, he takes up the elements of this world and confers on all the things and meanings of this Paschal gift. So Pope Francis is saying that God is actually present in the river, the trees, the fish, and the wind, and also in the Eucharist. Now, God made the world. He created everything, as in Eden. But God was there independent of the trees and the flowers with Adam and Eve. Right? He was in fellowship with them. His signature is upon his creation, but he is not in the rivers and the flowers and the trees and in the air. If we thought pantheistically, which is what this is, then we would also conclude wrongly that God is in everyone, irrespective of who you are. Right? And that is a very dangerous idea, because after the fall, God is not in everyone. Right? So this pantheistic idea that God is in everything, and leading to the false conclusion that God is in everyone, is very dangerous. Now, what is pantheism? You look at the word pan, it has two sections, pan and theism. Pan is
pandemic.
Like pandemic. It's all over the world. That's a pandemic, right? Theism is God. So God is in everything, in the whole universe, in everything, nothing excluded. Right? So the conclusion, a simple way of saying this is, all is God. Now, this is the essence of Buddhism. Right? In a Buddhist meditative thought, he is one with everything, nothing excluded. Right? That is the high point of Zen meditation, Satori. Right? It's in fact the high point of Hindu meditation, which is Nirvana. So everything, God is in everything. Oh yes, by the way, in Hinduism, in the word Om, there's sacred Sanskrit word, God and man are one from birth. So God is in everything, including all man. And yoga meditation is to discover that oneness, which is already there from birth. So in meditation, it's not about conversion. It's about discovery of God already there. So this is a completely opposite concept of Christian conversion. So now, why does the Pope go for this pantheistic thing? Now look at the second statement down there. This is from the Association of Jesuit Colleges. All right? To think that the leader of the Catholic Church is one who follows in the tradition of Ignatius. Now, Ignatius was a Jesuit. The tradition of Ignatius, whose life, Ignatius, has been devoted to finding God in all things. So Pope Francis, being an Ignatian, believes in Ignatius, believes in the theology of God in all things. So he's a pantheist. All right. So there are many articles now, if you Google, that Pope Francis is a revolutionary. He takes on the traditionalists of his own church. Many thousands, perhaps, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of Catholics are very upset and cannot reconcile to this revolution within the church. Okay, so he is upsetting the traditionalists within his own church. And this Vatican theologian, Monsignor Box, a prominent theologian and former consultor to the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith during Benedict, he is saying the church, through Pope Francis, is slipping into pantheism. Okay, that's what he's saying. And Cardinal Vigano, right, their cardinal, said Vatican II should be dropped and forgotten. In other words, much as John Paul started Vatican II and all this stuff, all embracing, Hinduism, Buddhism, and now pantheistic. He started that, and Vatican II should be dropped so that we don't carry on this thing that Pope Francis is doing. So their own cardinal is making a very strong point on their direction. Now, this is a very interesting thing. Pope Francis got the opportunity of speaking at US Congress. This is quite a few years ago. And he told Congress, US Congress, you must unite people. Your job is to unite people and religion. Everybody. And the way to do it is to ignore any difference between good or evil. Oh, that person is good, that person is evil. You ignore. Don't make a differentiation between good and evil. Between the righteous and sinner, don't make those religious differentiations. You must confront every form of polarization. Any opposites, confront it. Don't make a difference. And then you will bring peace between people and religion. Okay? And then he said the way to do this, where you don't make a differentiation, is to look at the contemplative, the meditative style of Father Thomas Merton. Now, who is Thomas Merton? Everybody got curious, right? So they began to Google Father Thomas Merton. And here is an introduction, a brief introduction of Father Thomas Merton. He is a Catholic monk, and he is the one who builds bridges with all other religion through meditation, through his contemplative style, okay? And this is one of his famous quotes. I see no contradiction between Buddhism and Christianity. I intend to become as good a Buddhist as I can. So he makes no difference between Buddhism, which is pantheistic, and Christianity. And I presume he means Catholicism. Okay? And recently, most recently, this is going back maybe 1.5 years, 2 years, Pope Francis came up with this unity video where for religion, baby Jesus, Christianity, I suppose, or Catholicism, and Buddhism, in that icon there, and the beads represent Muslim, Islam, and the candle, Judaism. He made a short little video to promote the unity of these for religion. And is that possible, I ask you? Because Buddhism rejects Christ, Islam also rejects Christ, Judaism currently still rejects Christ, and he's proposing a unity of these three with Christianity, which accepts Christ. Now, that is where we're going, okay? So I thought I'd show you these things of where things are going in religious terms so that we understand when we talked about the three messages, right? The three messages, remember, in Revelation 14. Let's read the first message, okay?
Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters.
So the first message to the world, the prophetic message that came out of Revelation 14, the sealing of the 144,000, remember this? The first message said, fear God, give glory to him, be awe of him, right? For the hour of judgment is come, right? It's coming to the time of judgment. Worship him. Worship who? Not the beast. Who? How do we make a differentiation between the beast who will soon claim to be God, and the true God? The true God is the one who made heaven, and the earth and the sea and the fountains of water. And when you look at those words, worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of water, and contrast it to the Sabbath day, the fourth commandment of God. Now, let's read the fourth commandment and you will see the tight connection between the two.
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
Now that Sabbath day, remember the quotes, is a sign that God is the one who's working to sanctify us. That we, both Christ and us, both become one. Right? So this is the unity that God's ministry, right? Christ's ministry in heaven is working to bring that unity together. Of us all together, all believers. So we must therefore realize that the keeping of the Sabbath is crucial to Christian life. Now, the Sabbath is also where we fellowship with God. And in that fellowship, he sanctifies us. And the purpose of the Sabbath is to bring us back to Eden, that perfect, that secure place where we can be in fellowship with God, one-to-one. And to make it more dramatic, to be naked before God. That is the purpose of the Sabbath. So, we then see Armageddon that will bring an end to these things. And Armageddon, as I said before, Christ comes with a sword in his mouth. And he tells us that to survive or to triumph in Armageddon is to keep your garments, to keep that robe of righteousness, that robe of sanctity, that robe that is to be given to us through the ministry of Christ who is now in heaven. Right? To be given to us that we may have it, that the shame, our nakedness may not be seen. This is the ministry, the spiritual ministry of Christ in heaven. So we come back to this spacesuit. We're now in the earth, an alien place, a sinful place. And the sins are getting higher and higher, and more prominent and more visible and more apparent. And we need that suit, that robe of righteousness, so that we yield ourselves trustingly and restfully with God. So Christ is bringing us into something called atonement. Atonement has the words at one-ment, which means oneness. Right? So we go back to Hebrews 2:11 again. For both Christ has sanctified us, and they who are sanctifying us, many of us, are all of one. For which reason, for which cause? He is not ashamed to call us brethren. We are one. That's the working of Christ. So, the beast, the sea beast and the land beast has ruled. It has instituted values and which have obscured Christ's work. For example, we saw the drift of this to hide the true work of God, to hide truth, to lie to hide truth, to trample upon the sanctuary, to institute church and state alliances, right? To bring forward unity, not sanctity, not sanctified unity, but alliances of man, of nations, alliances bringing religions that don't accept Christ into as if it's possible to bring them in harmony with each other. To sign joint declarations, which are false because they only address what is common, but ignore the differences which are crucial. The differences are what makes it all the more crucial, and to drift towards pantheism. Now, the unity that we are looking at, that we are watchful, we should be watchful of, is a false unity. And pantheism is a false unity. So we've got to be watchful to bear all this in mind. So we are criticizing and talking about a system of beliefs and governance. We're not talking about individuals. We're not talking about its memberships. We're not talking about people. We're talking about system of beliefs and governance. We're talking about a Babylonian system. Okay. Now, I put up this picture because I want to talk about Persian carpets. I once bought a Persian carpet, my only purchase ever. And I liked the picture. It was a tree of life. But when I bought it and asked the price, she said, oh, it's I can't remember, it was several $1,000s. I was shocked, like, why? And the salesman says, oh, but you must look at the knots and stitches. The thousands and thousands of knots and stitches. Now, I've tried to give you a great big picture journal, right? But that is not how we ought to study the Bible. To get to really understand it and to have confidence in it is to look at the knots and stitches. And that's where we want to go with you. To continue this, to look at the knots and stitches, okay? So, all right. So let's stop share and we can talk a bit further. All right. I've given you a lot of words through pictures. I hope it stirred up some thoughts in your mind. We've got time, I think, for questions. I've got time. So it's really up to you. You're welcome to go if you're in a hurry, but you're welcome to stay and talk. So how do they do it? They unmute themselves?
Yes, I have unmuted all of you. If you have muted yourself, you can unmute if you want to ask any questions. Yes, please announce your name so that we can know who's talking. I know we have covered a lot of things, so you might be like still processing it, but probably you already have questions. Please feel free to ask.
Revelation is really not easy to understand.
We can't quite hear you. Can you speak up, please?
So Revelation is really not so simple to understand, not so straightforward.
Revelation is not so straightforward, yes. So right now we are getting an overview.
Yeah.
Give you a different perspective, I think, from what you're normally hearing.
Have you heard anything like that before?
Have you studied Revelation before?
I did Revelation, but I still don't get it, and I think it's so complicated.
Yes, yes. Right. This is the big picture we're giving you. Yes, we do need to go to the knots and the stitches.
The knots and stitches.
Worth it, you know.
But you see, the knots and stitches actually only confirm this big picture. Okay.
So can you see the picture of the sea beast there? Can you arrive to know this sea beast and the land beast? Can you arrive to see that?
Can you arrive at?
Yes. Okay. Just to recap, right?
Okay.
I don't know if you were with us every session, okay? But we started with Daniel. Daniel saw four beasts. Four. In the statue, there were 4 sections, 4 kingdoms, and they were in the 4 kingdoms are in the statue, and the four kingdoms were also in beasts: the lion, the bear, the leopard, and a horrible, strange 4th beast. Right? And then a little horn came out of the 4th beast, and the little horn became not just a pagan military power; it became a very sophisticated religious power, right? And this sophisticated religious power ruled the earth until Jesus came again, right? So it's continuous, right? So, but you've counted it from Rome. The little horn started from Rome, the fourth kingdom. It was 2,500 till now. It's 2,500 plus years, and our leaders, our church scholars say, "Oh, we're still not so sure who it is for 2,500 years, and we're not sure who it is." The elephant is in the room, and we say, "Oh, there's no elephant in the room." Okay. Now, then that was Daniel, right? In the book of Revelation, in Revelations 10, in Revelations 13, okay, John now in vision saw. Now, when did John live? In which kingdom? John lived in Rome, right? The Romans crucified Christ, right? Okay, so John lived there. So then he described the beast. He said he was standing there and he saw a sea beast. He was living at the time of the sea beast, Rome. And then he looked and he saw a leopard, he saw a bear, and he saw a lion. Now John, living in the fourth beast, looked backwards. The beast before the sea beast was the leopard. And before the leopard was the bear. And before the bear was the lion. Right? But Daniel, when he saw the beast, he was living in Babylon. So he saw the lion, the bear, and the leopard. So both John and Daniel, by looking at it from different positions, confirms, and because John lived in the time of Rome, he saw the sea beast, and therefore the sea beast is Rome. Okay? Now, then we got to ask ourselves, out of Rome, did a powerful religious power come up finally? Is there one here today? The most a powerful religious power that came out of Rome, that has a history linking back to Rome, whose name, the church, whose name has the word Roman in it.
Roman Catholic.
Yeah. All right. So it's virtually by its own name.
Roman Catholic.
It links us back to that part of the time. And then if you trace the history of Roman Catholic Church, as in the pictures I've shown you, they all line up. That they won the alliance and where it's drifting to make this pantheistic unity. And pantheism is the opposite of Christianity, Christian unity. Pantheism is to bring things that are not united, not truthful, together. Okay? So, there is a great big picture. But, wow, oh, this is the elephant, this is the beast, right? So, to really nail it down, we have to then look at the knots and stitches for confidence, right? Now, the question then is, why is the prophecy written in such a way? It has to be written in such a way. If Daniel had said, and Daniel lived in Babylon, and Rome hasn't even happened. If Daniel had said, oh, Rome will happen. Now, remember, Bible prophecy, Bible, the way Satan is spinning the story is a different story. See, if Daniel had said Rome is going to come in the fourth kingdom, Satan would probably have created a country that's not Rome.
Different name, just change the
different name. All right? So we're thrown out. But here, the Bible talks about things in symbols. And then you can connect the symbols with the happening. And so the truth is protected. Right? So we're seeing these things. Right? The Bible talks about unity. Right? A false unity.
Yeah.
Babylon, right? But Babylon was confusion. It was a false unity. Right? So how did it happen? We're seeing it happening as pantheistic. So, I mean, do you expect John to say, oh, at the end of time, a pantheistic unity is going to happen? The word probably hadn't been invented at that time. But John described it. It's Babylon, it's confusion, it's many things coming together. It's man promoting himself to the highest. Now, the first Babylon that happened, Nimrod, after he died, the queen made him God. Okay, man becoming God. Right. So the meaning in history finds itself into the time now. Babylon shows itself to be above God, to be God. Now, the Bible says Babylon is fallen, is fallen. Right now, you take a note of this. When does Babylon fall? Babylon falls when it reaches the peak of its power. At its highest, it falls. Why? Because it reveals its evil. All along, the beast is revealing how good it is. Even pantheism is promoted as good. How?
Yeah.
Pantheism means God is in everyone. God's in the flowers and trees, and therefore in every man from birth. Okay? And isn't that so soothing for us all to know? Much as I am what I am, God was with me since my birth. And I don't need to change very much. All I need to do is to realize, to discover through a meditative process or contemplation that God is within. It's so soothing. And wasn't that what Satan said to Eve? You won't die. In fact, if you ate and participated in my fruit, you will be as gods, you won't die.
So it means right now we still have this pantheism belief, right? We still have it.
Say that louder for me.
We still have pantheism belief now, right?
You have pantheism,
Yeah.
definitely. Yes.
Pantheism is just a form of belief. It's the form describes Buddhism, right? Buddhism means and this was in Vatican II. Buddhism discovers who they are, realize that they are one in mysterious oneness with the universe, right? That's Buddhism, right? So pantheism exists very strongly now.
Like here, we are trying to do. I mean, the government is a racial harmony, so everybody.
Racial harmony. Okay, racial harmony.
Racial harmony. So you see, like just now, those four icon. It looks like a racial harmony thing, you know. Like
No. Hang on.
Embrace
Racial harmony is just us working peacefully together, not upsetting each other. Pantheism is different. Pantheism is religious. It says that we are all of one. God is in everyone. Racial harmony doesn't say God is in everyone. Racial harmony just says we all work peacefully together. Okay? So racial harmony is fine. I've got no problems with racial harmony.
Get it?
Yeah. So it's a big difference. Okay, those are very good questions because you need to think through these things, you know? All right. Any more questions? I really love questions because it shows that you're thinking. I'm stirring you up.
Yeah, got no time, got to go. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Shall we wrap up now?
Okay. You can always send your questions in either privately or through the chat group. I hope I've stirred you up enough to get a whole host of questions. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you so much. You can always ask us questions later on, okay? All right. Thank you.